Here we are then, back with a solo podcast, and it's not a Q&A this time. It is a recap of the biggest sales lessons I have learnt over the past little while, because the financial year April 23 to April 24 was my most successful in sales ever. And I made over £1.1 million worth of sales, excluding VAT. So you can add 20% onto that if you are so inclined, but we only really talk in ex-VAT in my world. And I've taken the time to distill down the biggest sales and communication lessons I've learned over that period that enabled me to hit that milestone and to continue to push on. And I think this is going to be a really valuable and actionable lesson for anyone that is either in the B2B space, in the B2C space, or is just looking to communicate their ideas and have more influence with people and sell them on the path or the product they want them to go on. So without any further ado, let's get into these lessons right now. And number one is one that may come as a surprise to you, and that is to detach from your product and service to be able to handle rejection better. You're going to get an awful lot of no's when it comes to pitching your product or your service. In fact, you're going to get a lot more no's than you will yeses. I actually spoke to Spencer Lodge back in August 2023, and he spoke about in his early days in his sales career, looking for 100 no's a day, chasing that no, getting used to that feeling, and eventually started to turn one or two of those 100 into yeses, 3 or 4 of those hundreds into yeses. And he got to a stage where he was getting a number more yeses, but still a lot more no's every single day. So I need you to detach from what it is that you're selling. That's not to say that you don't care about it, but understand this. You are not your product. You're not your service. A rejection of what you're pitching is not a rejection just of you. I think this is harder to do when it's your own business, especially if you're a solopreneur. But for me, this helped me detach from rejection in general. It's not a case of being hurt when you're told no. So you might be getting told no by getting past a gatekeeper on the phone. You might be getting told no to a meeting with a decision maker. You might be getting told no to the opportunity to quote. It might be no to the proposal when you did get the chance to quote. You have to be borderline indifferent to that no. And I want to stress this. This is not to say that you don't care. Far from it. You can objection handle, you can push back, you can see if you can improve the result, but also know that on the other end of the phone or the email is a client that is going to be right for you and that will buy. So move on from the no that you're getting and find somebody else who is going to say yes, that is a better fit, that will pay the correct price, that will work with you on a better basis. It's best to not linger too long on rejection, and certainly to not take it personally. The force of your personality is something that you can use to make more sales and to be a factor within getting the deal. How reassured and how much trust that you build with the client and how much they want to work with you personally. But there's so much more to it. There's your product, there's your offering, there's the benefits, there's the features that it includes, there's the actual impact that your product has. You cannot let the rejection deter you from going on to find the next person, and you cannot spend too long trying to persuade somebody who's never going to work with you to work with you. As ever, when I make these points, it's much more marketable and sexy and exciting if someone doesn't have any caveats to the rejection piece. But I will say that rejection to some extent should sting. While I'm saying you should be indifferent to it, it should sting when you don't win a deal or when you don't book a meeting. But it's not about you. Reflect on your approach, take time away to work on your skill set and your offer in depth, but also commit to a volume of activity and a size of pipeline that you're building where rejection is just part of that. And your number of activity and what you put out there into the world dwarfs the level of activity that you need to be a success, because the vast majority of it, there's going to be a lot of rejection in there and you've got to move on really, really quickly. Number two is one of the biggest lessons that I learned that enabled me to financially hit the numbers that I wanted to get to, both in terms of the sales I made, but the commission and the bonuses that I managed to get as well. And it is right salesman, wrong vehicle. This is actually an adaptation of what Adam Power said to me back in December when I was recording with him in Dubai, when he said right entrepreneur, wrong vehicle. Thankfully, I learned this lesson long before I spoke to Adam in 2023, because I left the insurance industry in May 2021 for this exact reason. The vehicle in this analogy is describing the industry, but it also includes the product or service that you're offering. If you are the right salesperson with the right skills, the right technique, the right attitude, and the right application, you may well be in the wrong sector or the wrong vehicle or selling the wrong product or service to hit the milestones that you truly want to hit and are capable of hitting. Let me say that again. You could be somebody that has all the right skill set and all the right characteristics, but you're selling the wrong thing at the wrong time. That was me. I was in the insurance industry. It served me really well for my initial career, but I was banging my head against a brick wall when it came to being involved in the size of deals that I wanted to be involved in delivering the numbers that I wanted to deliver for a company so that I could get paid down the line. Think about it this way. If the biggest deal that I could win was between a 10 grand and a 100 grand fee for the insurance broker, okay, great. If I was doing enough of that, of course, I could get paid a large percentage of that. But if you were only doing 1 or 2 of those, 3 or 4 of those, then how can you expect to earn 6 figures? Instead, I needed to pivot, move industry, apply the same level of skill set that I had when it came to opening doors with new clients, when it came to pitching, when it came to reassuring somebody, when it came to building an offering and a product to make it make sense for the client. If I could apply that in a sector where the deals were of a bigger size, where the margin and the profitability of the deals were of a bigger size, then I'm going to win. I'm going to benefit from that. So that's what I did. I moved into the furniture sector where, as I've demonstrated, I've done £1.1 million worth of sales at a 50% margin. That's 550k profit for the company that I work for. So of course, I can get paid far, far more than if I'm only bringing in 30, 40, 50k a year of profit. And even then, sometimes those margins were actually smaller because you were paying other things as well. So for me, you need to consider the vehicle that you're in. I've said in a previous solo podcast, I would maybe have considered if I was earlier in my career and I wasn't as established in the furniture industry as I am now after 3 years, I would have considered software, because that's certainly a vehicle where the contract sizes and the deals are so big and the spend by clients is massive. So you really need to consider, are you in a space where the deals are of a sufficient size that you can be paid really, really, really well, and that you can bring in a lot of revenue to justify how well you're paid as well. So be the right salesperson, but be in the right vehicle as well. And I'm not saying that insurance isn't the right vehicle for some people, because there's definitely sectors where people made a lot of money. And I worked alongside a few of them that were doing fantastically well, particularly in the London market. But where I was, it was not the right vehicle for me. So I needed to move and change and apply the similar level of skills that I was applying in that space with the same amount of work rate and effort. But I was commensurately paid considerably more because my value to the business was much, much higher. As a side point before we move on, if you're somebody that sells a product, making sure that you're targeting the right market is very, very important as well. I know a lot of guys that are interested in the fitness space listen to this podcast. My good friend Oliver Anwar, who I've recorded with a couple of times, most recently out in Dubai in March time, he specifically targets entrepreneurs and founders who have got out of shape to help them with their fitness coaching. And guess what? That market have a lot more expendable cash than a young guy that's looking to get ripped for his holiday to Ibiza or Marbella this summer. He might pay 150 quid for a month's worth of online coaching, whereas the entrepreneur might pay 2 grand, might pay 3 grand, might pay 4 grand, might pay 5 grand. So he was using the same product, but he changed the vehicle and the industry that he was shooting at. Okay, number 3, customers don't care about what you sell. They care about its impact on them. I can package this lesson up in so many different ways, and I'm really going to try and drill this one home. You could call it a term like afters, because if you are selling something, you care about what happens after your client buys from you. So think about that. What happens after the client buys? What is the result they get? You could call it a solution to a client's problem. It could be described as the bridge between a client's current position and where they're wanting to go. Another way of saying this is that you helped a client reach their desired state or destination. Whatever way you frame it, you are shifting your language to enable the client to picture and visualize where they're going to get to when your product or service is purchased. What does your product or service cause them to experience? What are the results? You're not selling website design. You're selling a website which allows them to promote and sell their services. You're not selling garden services. You're enabling them to have a presentable, aesthetic garden year-round. You're not selling fitness coaching. You're selling a healthier, happier, longer life with a more aesthetic physique. And a funny one that often comes up when I talk about this is, You're not selling legal services. You're keeping them out of jail or reducing the fine that they have to pay. So for the avoidance of doubt, they don't want what you sell. Your customer doesn't want what you sell. They want to understand how are they better off after they buy from you. So once you switch your communications to focus on this first and most foremost principle, rather than the history of your company, the features of your product, or anything else, you're going to become vastly superior at connecting with your ideal customer and converting into sales. Think less about who you are and your past, and think more about who your customer is and what their future state wants to be. If you only remember one point from this entire episode and you implement it, make it this one. You're going to make more sales. You're going to make more connections. It's going to be that fundamental. Think far more about what it is that your customer cares about and how you're going to get them there, not necessarily who you are, what you stand for, what you do, but talk about the results that the customer is going to experience down the line from dealing with you. Number 4, how you do everything is how you do anything. I think this is sometimes a cliched phrase, but you'll know by now on the podcast, I talk a lot about cliches being true and used so often because of their demonstrable track record of being true over a long period of time. So I really believe that you can instill a level of confidence in a client or a buyer by being who you said you were going to be over and over and over again and operating at a high level. So for me, that's things like my email replies, my proposal presentation, my follow-ups, my notes, my agreed actions, how I conduct myself on the phone. Everything is executed to a standard which reassures the customer. I'm going about a process of building a relationship where I am the trusted advisor, and how I show up in each of my interactions is just reinforcing that image the whole time. I talk a lot about identity on the podcast. I am building an identity as somebody that they can put their faith in. So best believe everything that I do, I'm trying to execute at the best possible level, which is in alignment with the image that I'm building. So I'm going to try and create an atmosphere of confidence and, most importantly, trust. I often say that I prefer to be trusted rather than liked by my client. And by doing what I say I'm going to do, when I said I was going to do it, will help to build that trust. Even at times, that means providing an update or a holding reply about when I'm going to expect to come back in full or when I'm going to be able to support with their inquiry in detail. And at that point, it allows me to just continue to be in touch and continue to reinforce the level of trust I'm trying to build with the client. My customers all know what it's like to deal with me, and there's a bit of a reassuring piece, and I'm maybe touching this more on in a further lesson. The vast majority of salespeople are not dealing with customers like this. So if you show up and you execute well across all the different touch points that you have, and how you do everything to a high standard is how you do anything, then you're going to give them confidence across the board in 2 things: your competence and your commitment to them to deliver a good service and a good product. You can instill confidence, you can instill trust by doing everything that you get the chance to do for them to a really, really high level. And through that, you will also stand out. Number 5, and this was a mistake that I made so many times, and I know many of you listening to this will have experienced this as well. Get the chain of command clear. One of the most common errors that we make is that we sell at the wrong level. You aren't pitching to the direct to the decision maker. You're most likely wasting your time, or you're failing to do yourself, your product, or your service justice in full. By this, I mean, you may well be speaking to somebody who you think is in charge and you think is going to make the decision, but ultimately it's not them. So there's a few checks that you can do to give you a really good idea before you go head first in and go charging towards this. So in the B2B world, you could be looking at their job title. Does it match the typical job title of a decision maker in your space? At your existing clients, do people with the title of operations manager make this decision? Do people with the title of finance director make this decision? Do people with the title of personal assistant make this decision? Probably not. So make sure you are assessing, have I got the chain of command clear from the very, very start? I have a few questions that I use, and it's important not to undermine the person you're speaking to initially and the person you're dealing with initially, because you're going to need them on side. They might well play a big role from an advocate's perspective, but you cannot risk that you share all the information to make the decision with a person that simply passes it on to somebody else's desk, and you then lose your ability to have the full influence that you can have. I know that if I present everything over email and a PowerPoint and I do a Zoom call with the person that I'm hoping to pitch to, I'm going to have a much better chance than if I do that to the person who's slightly down the chain and they then relay what I've told them, or they forward on the email, or they forward on the presentation, and they say, yeah, Colin was really good. Here's what he had to say. I'm going to lose an awful lot of control, and I want control over the transaction as much as humanly possible. So the main two questions I'm going to share with you that I ask that don't undermine the person that I'm dealing with and help me get to the chain of command and get me a clear sight of who I need to be speaking to is, each of our customers' organizations operate in a little bit of a different way. How is it your company make decisions for and insert the product? So for me, it might be each of our customers have a pretty varied way of making decisions like this. What is the process for you guys when it comes to purchasing furniture each summer? Or it could be, what is the process for you when it comes to your insurance renewal? What is the process for XYZ and XYZ Limited when it comes to buying the fridges for your warehouse? Whatever it is, just think whatever it is, you can put your thing in there and understand what is your process. It's a nice open question. However, the second one that I use is a little bit more direct, and you need to just work on how you land this. Bear in mind, I'm a big fan of using templates from people, but then putting your own spin on it. You're not going to become the B-Tech or the Aldi version of Colin, just like I'm not going to become the B-Tech or the Aldi version of Benjamin Dennehy or Andy Bounds or Stuart Bull or whatever other trainer that I've worked with over the years. So this question is, aside from yourself, who else are the decision makers in this process? This question is not perfect, but it can work really, really well because you're just asking nice and open, nice and direct, who else needs to hear this information? If they are not forthcoming with that, you need to probe. Or if they say, oh, yeah, I'm not sure yet who else is involved in decision making, you need to get deeper into it. Otherwise, you could spend time and waste time pitching at the wrong level. So please always bear in mind that the initiator of the buying process is often not the buyer. They might be the day-to-day user, or maybe they might be an influencer or an assessor in the process. You need to cut through this and involve all the right stakeholders as soon as possible. Bearing in mind that some of you listening to this might not work in the B2B world, you might be working in the B2C world, so business to customer. You might find that the person you're dealing with can't decide either. So you might have heard this before, and I've definitely heard this before. Oh, I'll need to speak to my wife, or I'll need to speak to my husband, or I might need to speak to my mom, I might need to speak to my dad. You can tackle this earlier and it not come as a late surprise. The last thing you want is a curveball at the end. Once you've pitched, once you've landed the price, once you've tried to gain their commitment and get it over the line, make sure you ask earlier on who, apart from yourself, who else is involved in this process to make the decision? Who else is going to help you decide what you want to purchase today or which option you would like to go for? And this actually leads into the next point that I'm going to make for number 6. And that's knowing how to communicate appropriately based on the information that you have. So number 6 is know your customer and know your audience. And this applies to both B2B and it applies to B2C. And it means that you can adjust your style based on who you're speaking to and what your customer is like. So the earliest example I can think of in this space was more than 10 years ago now, when I worked in the student insurance space, selling contents and gadget insurance for students that were going to university for the first time. Now, most of the events that I went to were a type of what was called key collection. So that was students collecting their key when they were moving into their new student hall for the first time when they were starting university. It often meant that they were with their mum and dad as well, who was coming to help them move their luggage in, who'd maybe given them a lift from wherever they were coming from. Now, think about this. Could you think of 2 more different types of individuals? A student off to their first day at university, mum and dad dropping their kid off at university for the first time. These are 2 different demographics with 2 different drivers. They have very different communication styles and they have very different ways that they're going to make their decisions. So think about this. What would a student care about when going away to university when it came to their items? And what would mum and dad care about when it comes to their son and their daughter going to university? For me, there were lots of different drivers I need to acknowledge. First of all, a student is going to be more casual than mum and dad. They're probably going to be more nervous than mum and dad because they're going into a new environment for the first time and they're going to be staying away from home for the first time. Mum and dad are going to be more worried about, oh, like that new laptop was really expensive for us to purchase. Whereas the student's probably worried if his laptop gets broken or damaged or stolen, that he needs to replace it in order to complete his coursework. Mum and dad are probably more worried about the fact that they are 300 miles away and he's all by himself without the necessary equipment he needs for university, where the student's probably worried like, oh, I'm going to have to find 500 quid to buy my new Acer laptop again, because guess what? I just left it in the library unattended and it went missing. So thinking about the different drivers and the communication styles that each of these people have, you adjust accordingly. When I'm speaking to both of them, I'm looking to each other between the two of them to kind of land different points. So with the student, I'm maybe landing, oh, and if you were to lose your phone on a night out, whereas with mum and dad, I'm saying, oh, and the big challenge is we can support when a piece of coursework's due and unfortunately something goes wrong with your laptop. These are the types of things that you're adjusting, because you don't want to sell the wrong thing to the wrong person and focus on the wrong benefits with the wrong person. Equally, with the student, you can adjust your language to be a little bit more colloquial, a little bit more relaxed, where the mum and dad be a little bit more proper, be a little bit more adult. This was something that translated down the line for me as well, because from a business perspective, including with different products, dealt with so many different people and decision makers. I know that's a funny thing to say, because previously I'm saying if job titles overlap, but sometimes companies do assign different responsibilities to different people. But if I think about the range of people I dealt with in the insurance industry, I was dealing with finance directors, managing directors. I dealt with student union marketing managers. I dealt with student union presidents. I dealt with operations directors. In the insurance world, in the furniture world, I've dealt with halls of residence managers, procurement managers, directors of estates. I've dealt with landlords. I've dealt with letting agents. I've dealt with property investors. I've dealt with property developers. It's been a really, really wide mix. And depending on who I'm speaking to, you must adjust the parts of the pitch that you focus on. The afters, or the things that they care about after you transact with them, will differ by individual. So adjust accordingly. I also would adjust things like your dress sense. So meet somebody where they are. I always think the salesperson should be slightly better dressed than the person they're going to go and see, or the person they're dealing with, but not so much so that they feel out of place. And I really, really think that having that variety and understanding of who you're dealing with and adjusting your communication skills accordingly is vital. There's a full episode in the archive with Thomas Erickson, who is the author of Surrounded by Idiots, which is based on the different personality types that people have on the Carl Jung model, which is called DISC, D-I-S-C. And that is really, really helpful for understanding what people's communication preferences are as well. Because even amongst these different groups, you'll have some people who like to be more abrupt. You'll have some people that like to be more data-led. You'll like to have some people that are more soft and flowery and sociable. And you'll have some people that like to be led more, and some people that like to feel like they're more in control of the process as well. So really take time to understand your audience and your customer and match your approach based on that. That's not to say become a chameleon, and you might well find there's different sectors that you just do better in naturally, and people buy from people, but people buy from people like you. So when you can shape yourself to be like your customer, you can have a much higher conversion rate and connection rate. Number 7, and another really hard lesson to understand, especially when you're experiencing quite a lot of rejection and it's not feeling like you're making the progress that you want to, and that is timing matters. Accept your role in the cycle. This actually means that there are times where you have to accept that you're not valuable, you're not wanted, and you're not of use to your client or your prospect at that moment in time. You could have the right message, you could have the right person of contact, you could have the right product, but you must have the right time. Accept the fact that buyers buy in cycles, and these cycles are related to trigger events. That could be a renewal date, it could be a tenancy date, it could be a budget start or an end date, it could be a launch, it could be an opening, it could be anything at all that triggers them to make a purchase. Now, think about that. These different events compel action for a buyer to make a decision or to assess their options. That means that there's going to be times in the calendar year when you're reaching out and you're trying to get somebody to move forward to a purchasing decision that you are at the wrong time and the wrong place. You cannot force this. You can create urgency, of course you can, but you cannot force somebody to make a payment or a purchase at a time that is not right for them in the cycle. And if you did manage to, the deal probably wouldn't last very long and the customer's going to have dissatisfaction and you're not going to get the benefits of it. Instead, if the timing is wrong, you are positioning yourself to be the choice that they make when the time is right. You can be ever present, you can be front of mind, but what matters most is that you're there and you're in touch and you land the right message with the right person when it counts at the trigger point. Okay, we'll hark back to the insurance side of things. If I'm speaking to a finance director about their insurance policy and the spend that they make on their commercial lines, 1 month after they've just gone through a hectic renewal process, either they're going to be really moved to speak to me because it's been a really bad renewal and they want to get it right next year, or they're going to be like, look, we've just got that out of the way. We're not going to focus on it again till 3 months before the renewal. Speak to me then. You need to accept that. You need to then focus on doing it when it counts. If I think about the furniture sector in the student accommodation market, which I primarily supply into, there is a set period during the summer when all the orders and fulfillment happen. Very few people want to talk to you in September about furniture when they've just done all their installs. They've just done all their installations. They will want to talk to you the next year. They'll want to talk to you in the March or the May when they're looking ahead to the summer. So thinking about your trigger points and your contact points and making sure those matter at the right time. So for example, in my day job, in my role, I will be more salesy and focused on quick turnaround and quick purchases during the summer. Whereas when I'm getting in touch outside of that, so for example, in March or February or January, it's more soft selling. It's more social selling. I'm building connection. I'm sharing information. I'm demonstrating myself to be a trusted advisor, knowledgeable in their sector. I'm not looking to make sales when it's not time to make sales. So really think about your timing. Think about your role within the cycle. When are the key trigger points? Now, your market might be extremely cyclical, but equally, you might live in a market and operate in a space where it's cyclical for different buyers at different times. That's ideal because it means you don't have revenue spikes. In my space, 1.1 million, most of that comes in a 4-month period in terms of the actual orders being fulfilled and paid for. So that's an interesting thing to consider. But make sure that you just accept that. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll understand why you're being rejected by particular buyers at particular times, and you will adjust your approach to build the rapport and then be in striking distance for the timing when it matters. Number 8, your meeting is only as good as your follow-up. This links into how you do anything is how you do everything. And when you think about how you follow up to a meeting, that will lay the foundations for what comes next. So in your follow-up, you're going to set out what was discussed, what was agreed, what are the next steps, what are the actions, and what do they look like, and who's responsible for those actions? What are some of those deadlines? I've had so many meetings where you leave excited and buzzing about the prospect of what's coming next, and it falls flat. Because the next thing that comes up for the prospect of the client means that you fall down the pecking order. We talked about timing there. You might have the best meeting ever. You guys are so excited. But then after that, the finance director gets a call to say, actually, we're going to need to make 3 redundancies in the operations team to save cost. So the last thing he wants to then talk about is go back to talking to you about your product, which is going to cost him money. Okay, bear all of that in mind. And instead, when you come out of your meeting, follow up as much as possible, lay out the actions, lay out what was agreed, be a man of your word or a woman of your word, and follow up when you said you would agree you were going to, and do it in detail. Meeting minutes are really, really helpful for what I call an audit trail. And that's not necessarily just within industries that are heavily audited from a legal perspective or a compliance perspective, but hold yourself accountable with that audit trail, but also hold account what your client has told you and said to you. I use this to actually build commitment as well. And we're going to cover more of this in the next lesson. But by writing down what was said, particularly what the client's current experience of the product or the service was, what the requirements were, and a list of what really matters to them, you can hark back to those to win their business. So for example, it might be, they said it was really important to secure their business and work together that you set up the payment terms with 30-day payment terms after the install or after delivery or after fulfillment. You're going to relay that phrase and that point later when you're matching your service and the after effects and impacts of your service to these points that they make. It might be that they say, okay, we'll go for the furniture example again. One of the most important things for me when it comes to working with a furniture manufacturer is the durability of the products. So for example, when I'm putting for my products, I'll say, you mentioned that durability was really important. So with that in mind, we've actually produced a thicker carcass of desk that's going to go in the student bedroom so that it lasts longer over the time span that you have it within development. That's a really basic example. Let's try and think from another way. They might say that when it comes to our new website that we're looking to build with you, we really want there to be a clear and easy way for somebody to purchase directly from the website or to book a meeting with one of our sales team. When you're landing it, you can say, you mentioned during our initial meeting that booking an appointment or making a sale through your website was really important. The good news is I've done a screen share, a screen record of just how simple it is within 3 clicks that somebody who's interested can book an inquiry or a fulfillment meeting or initial discovery meeting with one of your team. Or there's actually a checkout here that you can click through to, and it brings through all the different products that they want to, and you show them exactly how you do that. So when you do your meeting, make sure you follow up strong. Make sure it arms you with what the different timelines are going to look like, what you're responsible for, and when you're going to fulfill those, what they're responsible for, what they care about, and go back to use that later. Now, number 9, and this is one of my favorites, is building commitment through seeking mini closures and confirmations to proceed. The temptation in sales, because we're all working towards targets or we're working towards things that we want to hit in terms of milestones, is to just blast through our sales process. It's like, I understand it. Like, I've been on calls where somebody is definitely not committed to going forward and they're very, very lukewarm to what we're offering. I've just been like, oh yeah, and like, I'd love to do a quote for you, and I'd love to help you out with that, or I'd love to show you what we could do. And I've not really earned the right to do that, because in order to get paid and actually get the deal through, there needs to be some form of process. And that's not to say that you need to be inflexible and to not work through it in the best possible way. But if you're not seeking confirmation at different points within the sale, and different steps within the process, you're going to miss objections, you're going to miss red flags, you're going to miss potential deal breakers on the way through. And if you don't address those, it's going to come up at the end. It's going to be a big fat brick wall that you're going to hit by and slam by when it comes to trying to close the deal over the line. I would much rather know and tackle something head on than wait till you're trying to close and trying to finalize something and encountering all these unknown challenges that were just lying there in the background. They were the elephant in the room that you didn't address. You got to get those out in the open faster, because you can objection handle earlier in the process. You can build your pitch around the things that they're worried about to give them reassurance on. I mentioned in the last time, when they tell you things they care about, you're going to frame what you pitch for them using the words that they used, so using their language. So if you don't seek mini closures and mini confirmations throughout the process, you're going to come to a sticky end at the end if you're not fortunate. So good meeting minutes, good follow-ups are going to help with this, as per the point above, because you're going to refer back to what was said and what was agreed. But alongside that, I'm going to arm you with a few phrases just now that you can use, which grant you permission to carry on in your process, which allow you to gauge whether the customer is committed towards a transaction, because that's ultimately what we care about. I do not care if I have 1,000 quotes out there, all with people who are lukewarm to me. Whereas if I had 5 quotes out there with people that are hyper committed during the process, I'm going to be better off working on those 5 quotes where those people are much more likely to buy from me than those 1,000 quotes I've just blasted through a process and just thrown a quote out there and hope that it would land. So I've used a few different models over the years, and I've taught some of them at the different sales consultancy trainings that I've done for both individuals and for companies. But one of the frameworks that I use for the latter portion of closing a deal is called the 4 C's. We know I love alliteration. We know that I love to build things in that are easy to remember. So let's try this one. And it's called the 4 C's: confirmation, choice, comfort, and closure. And I'm going to share how 2 of those work, because I can't give everything away for free. So here's the 2 examples I'm going to give you. The first one is comfort-based, and you can use this slightly earlier in the process than you can use the confirmation one. So you will say something like this: at this stage, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. If I can offer you a product that fits all the requirements we mapped out previously, will you be comfortable to move forward today? So you can reword this as well. You could reword it to, would you be comfortable to be in a position to move forward with our quote? Or would you be happy to move towards working together? You are just assessing here, how happy are you if I can do X, Y, and Z? Are you comfortable to go forward? You are inviting them to say yes, or more importantly, you're chasing a no and a reason why. So if they said, no, actually, we need to involve James from finance, that's because you didn't ask about him. You didn't ask about who was involved early enough in the process. But you could also say, they might say, oh, well, we're not comfortable just now based on the price, or we're not comfortable just now based on the lead time, or we're not comfortable right now based on how this particular section of the website works, or how this particular section of your service works. That's really important. Now, the second example is one that I use when I'm closing later on, but it can also be used as a mini close during your process. Just vary how it works. Because the wrong answer here, or a lack of commitment from the client, means you need to pull back and tackle the objection, or you might even just kill the deal stone dead at this point in time because it's that big a deal. So let's recap. Sorry, this is the phrase I'll use. Let's recap for a moment to confirm everything we've covered up till now. You said that you have and you want this and this. Give examples. We've made sure the product has and does this and this. Use the same phrases. So the benefit to you was, and you will be, this and this. Insert things they care about in the afters. Is there anything I missed that is stopping you from moving forward and purchasing? The purchasing one for me will carry between the phrases like will vary between phrases like authorizing a PO or arranging payment via backs or credit card. So you can change purchase to whatever the terminology is in your space, or it could be signing the contract. So let's try and bring that to life. So I'll do something like this. Let's recap for a moment to confirm everything we've covered up until now. You said that you have and you want a reliable furniture supplier who delivers on time and on budget. We've made sure that the product is built to last within your developments and that we have a stock holding, which means that you can call it off when you need it to be delivered. So the benefit to you will be that your accommodation is ready for your time students arrive back, and we've agreed a pricing structure that is well within your budgets. Is there anything I've missed that is stopping you from moving forward and sending us a PO for the furniture today? There we go. Now, take the time, write that down with a pen and paper, write it in your Apple Notes, and map out what it would look like for your sector. The other 3 C's are really good too, but I can vary depending on which one that I use. The other 2 C's. So that's comfort and that's confirmation, but choice and closure are really good as well. And I vary which one I'm using depending on which buyer that I'm dealing with, what their style is, what their personality is. But also, if I'm feeling really confident, I can be more bolshy in how I'm getting that closure as well. And all 4 C's, they unearth objections that are sitting waiting in the background that you need to get out there into the open, because you cannot object an objection unless you know about it. Okay, number 10, and this is more of a mindset-based one. You need to remove norms. Remove the norms that different salespeople in your space have told you exist. This is where people will maybe say something like, no one answers the phone on a Friday, so there's no point in making calls. Or, it's Monday morning, everyone's catching up on an email, so they definitely won't speak to me or take a meeting right now. Or, managing directors of firms of that size, they always get screened by gatekeepers. These are norms or limiting beliefs that exist in order to make somebody who is not doing well in that space feel more comfortable with how they're getting on. I've heard so many people say this stuff, and they are all not true. Now, they might be true at different times. There might be companies that you phone that never answer the phone on a Friday. That's cool. But if you adhere to these traditions and cultures verbatim and you always believe them to be true, you will get the same results as the people who adhere to them. You will lose. You will not win. You must, by the very definition of being a successful salesperson, be an outlier. You must do things differently. You must truly do things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable and that make the people around you think that you're doing something radically different to them. You're phoning on a Friday. You're getting meetings on a Monday. You're getting past the gatekeepers, or you're phoning around the gatekeepers. You're doing things that they don't believe is possible, because the norms and the average, by its very definition, are not what you're shooting for. I'm a big believer in the process of increasing what I call the surface area of luck. And that means expanding your chances of hitting the jackpot by taking more shots, producing more input, and taking a more varied approach. I'm never, when I'm taking a varied approach, lowering the quality of my input or the quality of what I'm putting out there, but I'm doing lots of it and in different ways. So I'm increasing both the volume, I'm increasing the intensity, and I'm keeping the quality high. There is absolutely no way that I'm conforming to some nonsense about not making calls on a Friday, or that managing directors won't take an inbound call. Yes, they do. It can be your call. And it's even more likely because people have told themselves that they, as a salesman, they can't get through to this comforting myth that they'll fail because they haven't even tried. Then that's why you're probably more likely to get through. And believe me, I have been able to stand out and get through to some really incredibly interesting people in my sales career. And if you look at what I've done with the podcast in terms of the people I've been able to get on the show when the show had no right to get them on and based on its size, it was through my sales skills and my ability to not believe in the norms or not believe in what society or what standard people may tell us. There's a really funny example I've got. I got a meeting with the MD of a huge timber business, hundreds of millions of pounds worth of turnover, because I sent him a video when I was an insurance broker, and it was the first time that he'd ever seen a video where somebody spoke to him down the lines about the risk that his business faced, the likely trajectory of his insurance premiums and the different covers that he had, some of the tentative suggested solutions that I had as a broker, and it opened his mind up entirely, and he wanted to know more. He also sent the link to that Zoom video to his sales team, and honestly, my arse collapsed because you could track how many views it had, and normally your videos would get 1 or 2 views if somebody rewatched it, but it had 37 views, and I honestly was terrified that something like comedic had happened. Like maybe I'd like the button on my shirt had burst, or like maybe it kept filming and it seen me walk away and go to the bathroom or something like that. But what happened was he sent it to his sales team because he was so impressed by what I did. And he demanded his sales team learn from that approach and try to mimic it for their prospects as well. So by completely refusing the norms, you can't send a video to the managing director of a FTSE 500 business. Yeah, you can. You can't send a voice note on LinkedIn to somebody in that position. Yes, you can. You can't phone him at 7:30 on a Monday morning. Yes, you can, because best believe that's when nobody else is phoning him. Now, these things do not all pay off. They do not all reap rewards, but you give yourself a bigger surface area of luck. You give yourself a better chance. Break the status quo. Refuse the norms. Unless you want to get average results and be an average salesperson, then do not buy into the beliefs and the limiting ideas that most average salespeople have. Number 11, get in there and expand your offering. Use momentum. This can sometimes come under the definition of cross-selling, but for broader understanding and simplicity, I think it's important to win a customer's business for one service or one product initially, or one part of their spend in that area. And when you do this, make sure you do a great job. Make sure you impress them. And from there, you can start to expand out. You can ask questions like, what other areas do you spend on in relation to insert your product or service? Or you can be even more direct. What do you currently do when it comes to an insert a product or service that you know that they spend money on and you know that you offer and that you know that you can add on as well? So for me, it was often in the insurance sector, I would often solve a headache by brokering one policy that they had a challenge with, whether that was their financial lines policy, or whether that was a car fleet policy, or whether that was their public liability policy. I would come in and help them if they'd maybe had a big increase on that, and they would give me this like difficult curveball to deal with, and I would try and take a better approach and solve that with my skill set and the data that we had as a broker to mitigate the increase. And if I impress them with that, I could be like, oh, well, when it comes to your wider policies, I'd love to take the same approach that got a good result for us here. Are you open to us quoting for these lines or these other policies? In the same way, in the furniture space, I've won a lot of contracts for universities or private landlords or student portfolio managers, mattress contracts. And that's a product that's highly replaced in the student sector, and there's a lot of revenue in. But once I did a good job on the mattresses, I would open up and I'd be like, oh, and what is it you do for your desk chairs? Which is another really high churn item because students best believe they smash the desk chairs up something rotten or they break them up. Or I would open up and be like, oh, and what is it you do for your sofas? Or what is it you do for your dining chairs or your bar stools? Insert whatever it is. It could be that you offer social media management and you say, oh, what is it you do? You get in there and you manage to manage their LinkedIn, and you're like, oh, what is it you do for your email list? Because I could use the same copy that I'm writing for your LinkedIn on your emails. I'm just talking generalizations here, but the best way to build an opportunity with a customer is to get in on one product and then expand out. Don't always necessarily try and go in and win the whole hog. By that, I mean, don't try and win a full suite of services, when sometimes in order to gain their trust and to build momentum, you need to get in and do one thing really, really well and go out from there. And then you earn the right to ask them the question, oh, what is it you do here? One of the phrases I'll use is, I feel we did a great job when it came to X. What is it you do when it comes to Y? I've got a great offering when it comes to that I'd love to learn. I'd love to share more with you about. Something like that really, really helps. Now, number 12 is gather social proof, testimonials, referrals, and introductions. Now, let me just pull up what I've put down on this, because I want to give some really tangible examples I've done over the last little while. And I hope this speaks for itself, because all of us listening to this will maybe have heard me ask for a review or a rating on the podcast, or I've asked you to copy and paste the link to a friend or a family member that would benefit from that. And please do keep doing that. That is definitely why the show has ended up where it is. But this has allowed me to double down and extend my customer base in my sales job as well, not just to extend the podcast audience. So the social proof element comes from having customers who you've worked with previously who mirror or share similarities with your ideal customer profile. So thinking of the ideal type of person that you want to sell your product or your service to, think what they look like, what they sound like, how they are, how they operate, and then have a previous customer that matches that description that's going to help you bring to life what it would be like working with you if you were somebody else in those shoes that hadn't worked with you before. So this for me could be photos, it could be screenshots, or it could be any form of evidence that shows somebody that's your ideal customer using your service or your product and getting a good result or a good outcome. Remember, we're talking about afters and the results and the cause of effect of what you sold, not necessarily just they bought this. We want to say they bought this and this happened. We're going to bring it to life. Testimonials and case studies are a deeper level of social proof, because this is not only just evidence of your service being provided, but it's with the addition of a quote from a customer about what they experienced and how good a job you did when you were implementing that product or service. This for me is absolute gold dust, and you need to leverage this to help a new customer put themselves in those shoes and understand what it's going to look like in a month's time or 6 months' time or 12 months' time after they've worked with you. And they can imagine what it looks like. In the PT, in the online space, how many people do you see post transformation photos of their clients? Do you know what that is? Because it's showing you what it would look like to work with them and get the same result. You see what the before photo looks like and you're like, oh, I look a little bit like that. And you find out that the guy works a similar job to you, or he has a similar background to you, used to play football and was quite in shape at school, and then 3 years later he's just left university and he's put on a couple of kilos from still going out too much, and doesn't play football anymore, hasn't been training, and then his after photo he's got a six-pack and he's got some cap delts and some biceps, and you're thinking, oh, well, I could do that. And then if there's a testimonial or a case study, it'll be like a sentence or a video or a paragraph with that guy sharing his journey with that coach, and you're like, okay, I can now picture what it's like to be in those shoes and go from that position where I am just now to the position where this guy's in. And that's really helpful as well. Now, the next layer to this is, of course, referrals and introductions. And this is the fastest way to scale your business with the right kind of client. And it's by getting your existing client who you have right now to introduce you to companies or individuals who are like them with the same needs, the same problems, the same challenges, and the same buying requirements, and quite often the same budget as well. Now, I've got a few useful frameworks that I use for getting referrals, but I'm going to share with you while listening is the importance of doing your research before you ask about who your clients are connected with and asking for specific referrals. You can, of course, ask loosely, do you know anyone who would benefit from our service, and insert the result or benefit that they had. So, for example, I'll maybe say to a landlord who's got a portfolio of student houses, I hope you were really pleased with the service that we did for those 4 properties for this year. Is there anyone in your network that would benefit from the same level of furniture and delivery and install capabilities? And then stop talking. Or you could do it for something more specific. So for individuals, if you're a coach, you could say, so pleased with the result that we got together. Is there anyone else that you think would benefit from my services too? Stop talking, let them talk. But beyond that, I will look at more details. So you could do this on an individual level, but we'll give an example for companies. I will look at who the individual, my contact, is connected with on LinkedIn, and who they are on the same procurement platform or the same frameworks as. I'll look at who they've maybe spoken at events with, or who they're friendly with when it comes to the network or the sector that they're in. When you start to understand who else they're connected with, that'll really, really help. The only other thing that I've done that's quite sneaky is I will sometimes know what part, like if they've maybe bought or sold from somebody before as well. So for example, if I know that the operations management team for a development is related to a developer that I want to get introduced to, and I've supplied to the operations team, then I'll maybe ask them to introduce me to the person that owns the development rather than operates it, and much more can come from that too. But all three of these approaches, social proof, testimonials, referrals, and introductions, they will help your prospecting efforts, and they will allow you to filter for people who are like your ideal customer, who have the same requirements, the same needs. And there's nothing quite as good as having a warm referral or a warm introduction, or if the scale back from that is you having social proof and a testimonial, helping somebody visualize and understand what it's going to look like, then that's going to be so helpful, because you're going to work so hard to win just one new client. If you can then double up with a referral, that's incredibly time efficient, and it also has the backing of being the right type of client that you want to work with as well. And you've already got that greater level of trust because it's coming from somebody that they know before you. So you build up that level of know, like, trust before you've even started, and you can move forward with the sales process quicker than if you're approaching somebody cold. Okay, number 13, and we're going to finish on this one. I've got a few more, but we'll finish on this one just for time's sake. And this is encouraging, I hope. Most salespeople and experiences are absolutely terrible. And it's good news, because if you've been able to listen to some of the lessons that I've shared today, and you're somebody that's really diligent on working on yourself and your approach, it's really easy to stand out. And I know that I've been able to stand out in my sector by implementing the different behaviors, the lessons and the approaches that I've learned over this time. Clients actively enjoy dealing with me, and they're going to enjoy dealing with you too, even when the purchase that they maybe are making isn't exciting or sexy. So the two industries I've made the most sales in, insurance and furniture replacement, they're not particularly exciting. They're actually a bit of a necessity, like a necessary evil that you have to spend money on. But you can make the process they're involved in less painful and actually more enjoyable, or at least more efficient, that they have to go through and get through. You can make it easier to go through that process and actually them not begrudge the fact that they have to do it, just by you being a pleasant and good operator that gives them reassurance. So I want to say that you should feel empowered that by implementing some strong behaviors and some strong principles, you're going to set yourself apart. And that's absolutely been my experience. You can be a pleasant surprise in a customer's day and break free from this just sea of inadequate, incompetent drivel that so many people get served up in a sales process. So I'm actually really excited to share this episode with you. I think the 13 insights that we've gone through are a great start point for improving your sales ability and your communication skills. And I've got so much more saved up in the different presentations and trainings that I've done for both individuals and sales teams over the last 18 months. And I'm also starting to collate things down into the best possible video content I can produce from my sales masterclass, which will be a video course where you can really upskill in this vital area when it comes to business and life. If you want to learn more about what I'm doing in this space, I want you to DM me the word sales masterclass, and I'll share details on how you can get involved in order to level up when it comes to your skills, your communication, and your ability to sell. And a final thing I want to say is, as always, thank you for your support when it comes to the podcast. We're actually just around the corner from a solo episode 259 it will be. So if you have any questions for that, please make sure you drop them in there, and I can maybe answer them publicly about all things sales. Thank you so much as always. I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.